change the name of this ashram, grandfather suggested. So this was an interaction between Ela ji and her grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi. And with that, Ela ji, please do continue.
Okay, thank you so much. That was, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ela ji, I'm able to hear you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that was a very nice anecdote in my early life when I was just about 6 years old. But I want to talk today about, how Gandhiji's anecdote led to changes in his life. So this whole, discussion is about changes. And it's not just about changes in Gandhiji's life, but how important change is. So basically, I'm talking about change. Some of the key issues of COVID-19, right? Firstly, I'm not sure why this thing is misbehaving.
I think the bottom right, you should be able to see like the presentation full screen. So you can click on that.
I'm just gonna get to
at the bottom near the Zoom window.
It just keeps going back.
Lakshmi, I think your face is getting cut. Can you move a little to the left?
So basically what I'm saying is that change is important. And what COVID-19 has shown to us is that, there are certain changes that we have to make in order to, to mitigate the effects of COVID-19. And I don't have to go into details. We know social distancing, washing of hands and all those kinds of things. But basically, what it has shown to us is that there is a need for humankind to look at a change. And this is, 4 or 5 basic changes in order to avoid the transmission of this disease of COVID-19. But it also shows that there is a need for us to relook at who we are and why we are on this earth. So there is that bigger change in our worldview. But what we find is that often people are afraid of change and are reluctant to actually make the changes. And yet, as we see with COVID-19, change is necessary and is also inevitable. So this is what I'm looking at Gandhiji's life in the context of this present situation that we find ourselves in. So going back, the lessons that Bapuji taught us. Okay, let's see this particular slide, right? The importance of early childhood. Now, if we look at Gandhiji's life, you see the importance of the early childhood development, what we learn in the first 10 years of life. And Gandhiji spoke about that. I don't know how to put off the sound.
Is the sound part of the presentation?
Is it affecting the presentation?
It's kind of coming in the way when you're speaking.
Go back.
It's slightly coming in the way when you're speaking.
Yeah, can you see the slides now?
Yes.
I'm able to see the three lessons we learned from Bapuji's life, that slide. But it's not full screen.
So can I just and don't worry about the slides.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So we were talking about change and why often we find that change is difficult, and sometimes we don't want to change. But now Babaji has taught us that, in his life, the importance of the early childhood development period, when he learned in his early days, you know, it developed his conscience, it developed his ability to sift wrong from right, and the idea of critical thinking. And you see this in his early life, when he saw those three, particularly the three film, plays, Shravana, Harishchandra, and he learned from these that care for the parents is important. The truth, Harishchandra play showed him that truth is important, and so he was able to learn that which remained throughout his life, because throughout his life, the inner voice that he talks about is the conscience. So his conscience developed from that early childhood experience of his. The second thing is that you don't just learn, but as you learn lessons in life, you start implementing them into your life. So this is what Gandhiji did. The minute he decided that he has to do certain things, he started looking at it and then implementing it into his life, like vegetarianism, like simple lifestyle, and so on. And the third thing is that you don't only learn in your early days or schooling days, but learning is a lifelong experience. And right until the time he was on his deathbed, he said that, he's still learning. In his old age, he said that he was still learning. And as he was learning, he was implementing it into his life. So learning is a lifelong experience. Number one is that in the first 10 years, what you learn is about behavior and about your outlook to life and so on. And that remains with you throughout your life, that early learning period. The second is that learning is not just about learning, but you begin to implement that in your life. And that is the most important thing about learning. Because otherwise you learn something, and if you're not implementing it, it's a useless lesson. So you have to implement what you are learning into your life. And the third point is that learning is a lifelong process, right? Can you see when he came to South Africa, he was dressed as a lawyer and he had the stiff collar. The first point about his attire. And I'll tell you just a little story about that as we looking at anecdotes to make it interesting. When Gandhiji came initially, and he had to wear these stiff collars. As you can see in this dressing, that collar has to stand and it has to be quite stiff. So to have the collar stiff, he has to put starch on it. And he decided that instead of sending his clothes to the laundry, he will wash his own collar and starch his own collar. So he decided to do that, and he starched his color. And because he was trying out for the first time, he had used a lot of starch on his color. And then when he started ironing it, he didn't iron it well enough for the starch to get into the color and hold it. But instead, there was a lot of starch that was left on the collar. So when he went to the court, the starch was falling off his collar. So he had all these white patches on his suit, and all his colleagues laughed at him. And he wasn't daunted by this, jeering of the colleagues. He told them, well, I tried to wash my own color and I'm learning. And I will perfect it eventually. So he just made a joke of it and, carried on with his life. So this is an anecdote which shows that change is difficult. I mean, another person would
இது
have
வரலையா
been
இப்போ?
very
வீடியோ
embarrassed.
வீடியோ வரலையா?
But Gandhiji didn't worry about that
இப்போ என்ன பண்ணட்டும்?
embarrassment
நான்
or
எதை
anything. He
ரெக்கார்ட்
just
பண்ணட்டும்?
went to
எனக்கு வந்துருச்சு
court
நெட்டு.
and carried on with his life and made the changes until he became
ஓகே,
quite a
ஆடியோ
good,
அண்ட் பவர் பாயிண்டே வச்சிடவா?
person at ironing and starching and so on. And
அதான்
there's another story
ஃபுல்
that when Mr. Gokhale
ஆமாம், அப்படி
visited
வச்சிடவா? அதில் மாதிரி வச்சிடவா? பவர் பாயிண்டே அதுவும் கவர் பண்ணுற மாதிரி
South
வச்சிடவா?
Africa,
ஓகே, சூப்பர்
and he wanted his clothes ironed.
சூப்பர்.
And Gandhiji said, I'll iron it for you. And initially,
ஓகே,
Mr. Gokhale was
நான்
quite
இப்போ அந்த
afraid
போர்ஷனை
that
மட்டும்
he might not be able to
ரெக்கார்ட்
iron
ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணுறேன்.
and was reluctant to give it to
ஓகேவா?
Gandhiji. But,
சரி, ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே.
Bapuji
நான் எனக்கு ஃபோன்லேயும்
persuaded
பண்ணுறேன்
him,
நான்.
and then he ironed the
ஓகேவா? ஃபோனில் அது
clothes
நடந்துகிட்டு தான் இருக்குது, அது
perfectly,
நடக்கட்டும்.
and
நான் இப்போ இதை
Mr.
மட்டும்
Gokhale was
ரெக்கார்டை
very
போட்டுட்டு
happy
நான் உங்களுக்கு மெசேஜ்
with the
அனுப்பிச்சிடுறேன். எனக்கு
ironing.
எதாக இருந்தாலும் திரும்பி ஃபோன்
So
பண்ணுங்கள், என்னோட
it
மொபைல்
just
ரெக்கார்ட்
shows,
ஆகிட்டு இருக்கு.
that he
ரைட், ஓகே,
perfected
பை பை பை.
whatever he began to learn. Okay, so that was the story about the change in respect of his clothes. Now we go to the next episode, and that is um, yeah, okay. So this is about religion. When he came to South Africa, he was brought, the first photograph is a person by the name of Dada Abdullah. He was the person who invited Gandhiji to South Africa to come and represent him in a case. And so he came and he lived with Dada Abdullah in his home. And Dada Abdullah was a Muslim. So he began to read the Quran. He learned a bit about the Muslim religion. Even went to the mosque with Dada Abdullah. And so he began to learn about Islam and the Muslim religion. Whilst he was there, he made friends with the second person, and that is Mr. Rustamji. Now, Rustamji was a Parsi and was a great friend and follower of Gandhiji, and also assisted Gandhiji in later life quite a bit. So he learned all about the Zoroastrian faith from Mr. Rustamji. And then the third person is Mr. Polak. Now, Mr. Polak was also a very good friend of Gandhiji, but he was also a Christian. And so Gandhiji learned about Christianity from him and from several other friends that he had during that time, including the lawyer, Dada Abdullah's lawyer, and Mr. Doak, and so on, whom he came into contact with. And so he learned about Christianity.
But what he learned from all these faiths is that it's important to learn the different faiths and to respect them. But you don't have to convert. You need to learn about your own faith as well, which he learned from, there was um, Rachanji, who was a very good friend of his brothers, and later he became a friend of Gandhiji. And he learned a lot about Hinduism from him and from the books that he read. So for him, all the different faiths had important messages. And therefore, it's important to learn about the different faiths, but also learn about your own faith and to, enrich your understanding. This is what happened to Bapuji. He didn't need to change, but he enriched his understanding of religion through these diverse religious beliefs. He also had Jewish friends, and he learned a lot about the Jewish religion as well. And yeah, so the anecdotes about the different faiths and all that are many, and you will read about them in Gandhiji's life story. So I won't go more into that aspect, except to say that religious diversity was important to Gandhiji, and he said that we must respect all the different religions, not just tolerate but respect them. Hmm. So the next issue is about satyagraha in South Africa. It was the first time that he began a movement to oppose the injustice that was taking place in South Africa. But when he started, it's now we must remember that it started in 1906. The first satyagraha movement that he started was in 1906. And at that time, if we, look at history generally, you'll realize that the position of women was, very, very sort of backward in the sense that women were, relegated to the kitchen. They were not allowed in public life. There were many jobs that women were not allowed to enter into. They weren't even given the vote. In many countries, women were not allowed to vote around the world. So women's position was really bad at that time. And in keeping with that, when he started, I mean, this wasn't by his design, but it just happened that all the satyagrahis were men. And so if you see the slide, you'll see all men in the leading satyagrahis, the leaders of the satyagraha movements. They were all men. And they were uh, Indian men because this particular bill that affected them affected Indians, which he was resisting. So it was mainly Indian people. And then this bill also affected the Chinese people. So when the Chinese saw the Indians protesting, they also came to Bapuji and they asked him to, talk to them about this movement, the peaceful nonviolent movement, which he called Satyagraha. And so they also joined in with that movement. So when you see the picture, you'll see some Chinese and you'll see Indian, but all men. Okay? Are you able to hear me? Yeah?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Okay. So now when you go on and you come to 1913, this is the big, movement. By 1913, Gandhiji had, in 1904, he had moved to Phoenix Settlement. Now, Phoenix Settlement had three frontiers, on the borders. So, on the one side was the Shembe organization, on the other side was the Dubé school and his settlers, and on the third side was the sugar estate with the barracks where the sugar workers were living. So he made contact with the sugar workers, and that started in 1904, that contact with the sugar workers. So by 1913, he realized that there were quite a few problems that the sugar workers experienced, besides the fact that they were indentured workers, and that in itself was a great exploitation. But when the sugar workers completed the 5 years indenture contract, they were now forced to pay a £3 tax. And that £3 tax, at that time, £3 was a lot of money. So, in order to pay that £3 tax, they would have to work and earn that money, and they weren't able to earn enough money to feed themselves, to look after their families, and to pay this tax. So, they had great difficulty. And it was the tax was meant to put them in that difficulty so that they would then go and sign a further 5 year contract and work in the sugar fields and, accept the hardship of the indentured workers. So this was to lure them back into working in the sugar fields. So they were protesting against that £3 tax. Initially it was £5 and then it was reduced to £3. And then after Gandhiji started the Satyagraha, it was abolished completely. So this was in 1913 that he, got the sugar workers involved, and he had the pass laws where the other Indian people and Chinese people were involved. And then there was another case that was heard in South Africa at that time. And this case involved the wife of a person. He was a Muslim person who had married in India and brought his wife to South Africa. And the case was to say that the wife was not a legal wife, and therefore she had to return to India. She can't, the country wouldn't accept her as a legal wife. In other words, what the case established is that the, you know, traditional marriages of Indian people were not recognized by the laws of South Africa. And so all the women, including Kasturba, would now not be the legal wife of Bapuji. And so Kasturba was quite upset about it, and all the women who were in the ashram were also upset about this law or about this finding. And so they were willing to go out and protest, and Bapuji supported them, despite the fact that throughout the world, the position of women was so low, but Gandhiji encouraged the women. to go on this march together with the men, side by side with the men. So in 1913, this is what happened. And there were a whole lot of women who marched, including Kasturba. And you might have, I'm sure you've heard of Amma, the young lady who was from India who went to prison, and she actually died in prison because of the terrible prison conditions. She came out, she was sick when she came out, which then resulted in thousands of people marching across the border and engaging in that 1913 satyagraha. And eventually the government had to give in. So the two things that we learn from this, number one is the fact that masses have to be involved in the satyagraha, in any movement. You can't just have a movement of a few rich people or middle class people and leave out the masses of the poor and the working class people. You have to have a unity amongst all the people in order to be successful. So the masses had to be involved, and in that 1913 march, the masses were involved. And the second thing is that women also need to be involved. We all know that 50% of our population comprises of women. In South Africa, it's more. It's 52% women in South Africa. I think in India it's a little less, but generally worldwide it's nearly 50% that are women. And you can't leave out 50% of the population from any struggle that you are having or anything that you want to do. You have to include them. So this is the second lesson that Gandhiji learned and he implemented, not only in South Africa, but you know that in India after that, many women were involved in the Satyagraha campaign. And you had many women leaders who participated in the campaign, Sarojini Naidu, Aruna Asif Ali, Kasturba, and many other women who participated. Okay? So that was the next lesson that Gandhiji learned. We'll go on to the other. So, can you see this one? Women passive resistors with their children and everybody in it. And Kasturba going to the villages to organize women. Yeah. And this was Mr. Tammi Naidu. His entire family was deeply involved in the struggle and are still uh, involved in the present government and involved in community work in South Africa. This is the 1913 march where thousands of people walked across the border. And this is Phoenix Settlement. So this house was rebuilt where you see these four big pillars. There used to be wooden pillars. When it was rebuilt, because it was destroyed and rebuilt, when it was rebuilt, people felt that wood wasn't a good substance in that area because there's a lot of white ants and borers in that area, and they eat up the wood, and so you have to keep renovating the place. Whereas if you do it with cement, it would last longer. And so they changed those poles from wooden poles to these four cement poles. But otherwise, the design is the same as it was in 1904, and that is the house in which Gandhiji lived, and Kasturba and their children, two of their children, one was born in Durban, the other was, no, both of them were born in Durban, but they came to Phoenix Settlement to live in this house. And I was also born there because my father continued to live in that house. And it was, he built a new house because this one was eaten up by Boers in 1946. So we moved out of this house in 1946. So all of us were born in this house here. Now, this is where Gandhiji simplified his lifestyle. Um, I'll just go back on the slide here. Okay, so that was the house, and this is the printing press. And again, you can see this printing press. It's got that old, wood and iron building that was built by them personally. Um, Rustamji gave them the wood and iron, and the inhabitants of Phoenix built this whole place. And that's where the press was located. Today there's a new press, and I'll show you the pictures later. But what happened at Phoenix Settlement was two things. Firstly, that his whole lifestyle changed. If you see, he lived in this house here, the house in Johannesburg. You can see a double-story house. It was a beautiful, house that was built in Johannesburg in the city with running water and all the services and so on. Refuse removal services, sewage system, and all that. And he moved. Now here, this is Tolstoy Farm, which was, he established Tolstoy Farm in 1910, but Phoenix was established in 1904. So Phoenix and Tolstoy Farm were the places where he began to look at simplifying his life, not just his clothes, but his entire lifestyle. So he moved to this rural area where there were no services at all. And he had to look at how to keep the place clean, the environment clean, look at toilet facilities, which were not sewer facilities, but where there was, a different system, a pit system, a bucket system, which he had established over there. And to look at how this could be done in an environmentally friendly way. So he began to learn about the environment. He began to learn about how to live on a farm and how to grow his own vegetables and fruit so that he can live a healthy life. So the focus was on environment and health. And he looked at a holistic approach to health. Now, when I say holistic approach, it means that you don't just take, when you have a headache, don't just go and take an aspirin or something to relieve your headache. But look at why are you getting the headache. So look at the causes of your illness, not just the symptoms of your illness. And this is what he did at Phoenix. Looked at the causes found different ways of, treating ill health, and also looked at how do you create conditions of good health so that you don't get sick. You don't need to get a headache. You don't need to get sick if you are looking after your health. And so he looked at nutrition, good nutritional habits, exercise, fresh air, treating yourself with nature, having natural remedies to ill health instead of taking medicines and having side effects and so on. So this he began to experiment with at Phoenix. He read books, hundreds of books on good health habits and so on. And one of the things, an anecdote, is that he, when Kasturba was expecting her third child, he read a book on how to look after children. It was a book aimed at mothers because everybody thought that mothers have to look after children. But he felt that he also needed to know how to look after children. So he learned about how to look after children. And now this was in the 1900s that this child was born. But in those days, they didn't go to hospitals to deliver children. The midwives would come home and deliver the children. But the midwife was delayed. And so Bapuji actually delivered the child himself. He assisted Ma to deliver the child. Now, in that period, as I said, the whole idea of women and men was so different. A man would never consider, delivering a baby. And a husband, today, husbands go into the maternity wards and help their wives with delivery. Many men do that. I'm not sure about the position in India. But I know that many modern men like to go and assist their wives when they are giving birth. But in that time, things were completely different. But Gandhiji actually did that. So he was ahead of his time. And it shows that when he began reading, he began to implement all these ideas into his life and gave attention to his children and, learned about how to look after them properly. So that was the anecdote about Phoenix settlement. I'll just go through the other, um, you know, um, today at Phoenix settlement, we have this computer class. And again, going back to COVID, you see that these are all deprived people. Phoenix settlement is surrounded by jhopparpattis. All the people who live around Phoenix are living in informal settlement, and they are the poor community. So these are children, and some are adults there who are quite poor, but they are now coming to learn computer literacy. And by developing that, we see that the new normal is going to be this kind of communication through the computer, through internet, and so on. And so it's important that we started this 2 years ago, and it's going to help them in the future because that is the future. This is COVID-19 is going to be there for a long time. And for a long time, we have to begin to get accustomed to this kind of communication, to this kind of living. And so it's a new habit that we all have to begin to formulate and to adjust to the new conditions. So I'm just showing you this that's happening at Phoenix. But in Gandhiji's time, I spoke to you about Mr. Dubey. Mr. Dubey was the first president of the ANC, and he was very much influenced by Booker T. Washington. I'm not sure if you all know Booker T. Washington, but Booker T. Washington started a new method of teaching. Uh, and he was an African American. And in Tuskegee, the school still remains there, and it's very much like your school. It's a rural area, and what you are doing, using Naitalian, that is what they did. That is what he talked about. That you must teach to children to learn with their skills, hand skills. And so Mr. Dubé started the Hlange High School on the basis of that Booker T. Washington's ideas. And Gandhiji also then implemented those ideas and developed them into the what you are doing at present. So that's just the school there. It still exists, although it is more or less a normal school now. But they do some handwork skills as well. In the whole question of education, how important it is, you see Ba here reading a newspaper, but when Ba got married, when she was born, girls didn't go to school. They didn't want to, they didn't think it was important for girls to be educated. They learned at home. They learned how to look after your home, how to look after children, how to cook. And those were the important things for girls to learn, not to go to school. But Gandhiji had a different idea. And constantly, there are lots of anecdotes about him and Kasturba. Kasturba used to think, why do I have to learn to read and write? But Gandhiji would insist. But now you can see that here Kasturba is, and she is reading a newspaper. And, so she also evolved over time. And this is what you see in both their lives, that there was a constant evolution in their lives. Um, that's Mr. John Dubé. This is Mr. Shembe, who had a huge, you see these people. He was a very spiritual person, and he also believed in handwork. And it was in this settlement that they first started the, beautiful beadwork. They used to make beadwork and then sell their articles to people, but also they used to wear a lot of beadwork. So this is just a picture of him and his tribe. There are hundreds of people, thousands actually. He's got a very big following in South Africa. And he was a neighbor to Gandhiji. And here you see Mr. Kallenbach. Mr. Kallenbach was a Jew, but he was also a very close friend of Gandhiji. And the anecdote again here is that it was during that time in the 1900s that the whole idea of the kibbutz started. And the kibbutz system is a Jewish system where they, you know, embrace simple life. They even discard money, and they become self-sufficient. They live in this village, which is, self-sufficient. They rely on a barter system. So if you've got pumpkin, you give the pumpkin and you take the other person's potatoes. And that's how, you barter with each other. So the kibbutz system had started. And Gandhiji's ideas were also, sort of influenced by these ideas of the kibbutz. And one of the things that matches the kibbutz system is the whole idea of the spinning wheel. And when you look at the economy of the spinning wheel, if you read, Kumarappa's books on economy of permanence and so on, you see that the whole idea of this spinning is that you could grow your cotton yourself. So you're not importing anything. If you're a tailor, you are buying material from someone. But if you are looking at khadi, you are growing your own cotton. Then you process that cotton. Then you make that cotton into the puni, the puni that you use to spin the thread. You spin the thread, then you weave it, and you get your material, and then you sew. So you do the whole thing yourself, right from growing the cotton to wearing the clothes. It's all done by yourself. You're not buying from somebody else. Now, the reason to do that is that then you don't open yourself to exploitation. So, what is happening at the present moment now in the COVID system? We are affected by this COVID-19. Somebody will go and find a vaccine for it, and then you'll be forced to buy that vaccine. Because you need it, you will be prepared to pay whatever they charge you. And when you are prepared to pay that cost, they can exploit you because now they are going to make lots of money. They are not, reducing their profit margin to the smallest level so that they can make a profit, but let the other people buy at a lower rate. No, that's not how people think. People think, let's exploit them, let's get as much as we can from them because they are in need now. So the same thing happens with everything. When you want cloth, they can sell you the cloth at the highest possible price. You need it, and so you are going to be prepared to pay that price for the cloth because you can't make it yourself, so you are dependent on them. And this reduces the dependency on somebody else. You do it yourself. So I'm just supporting what you are already doing in your schools. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and I hope more people will learn from the experiences that you all are, teaching to the people. So this one is a farewell when Gandhiji left South Africa. This was the farewell that they gave him. And I am also saying farewell now. Maybe you want to ask questions. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elaji. That was quite enlightening and a perspective that we don't generally get to know about. There were events of unrest and discrimination when you were a child. How do you look? How do you think back on that time, and how did it make you feel? Especially because you may not have understood the full extent of what. of what was happening back then?
Well, as we grew in South Africa, there was just no ways that you won't understand because all the time, you are faced with for whites only signs. Everywhere you go want to go to a library. The library you can't enter because it's for whites only. You have to find a library for the black people. Post office, there are different entrances. You can't enter through the main entrance. That's only for whites. You have to enter through the back entrance where the black people would enter. So everywhere you were confronted with these kinds of things. So growing up from early childhood, you begin to see this and you begin to think, wow, this is real insult. I mean, this is how we have to live in this country. So I'll tell you again a story. I was about 19 years old when, after coming to India when I was 6, then the next visit was when I was about 19. And I came to India, and my brother was already staying in India. So he one day, took us to a restaurant for dinner. And I looked at this restaurant, it looked like a beautiful place. And I said, Arunbhai, are you sure we can go in there? Are we allowed in? And he laughed and he said, you're living in India now, you're not in South Africa. So this is how it was in South Africa. You sort of all the time thinking, are we allowed to go in? You no longer want to look at the signs because there are signs everywhere, but you are reluctant because if you go in, they'll insult you, they'll throw you out, and so that was life in South Africa, and we grew to hate it, and we grew to resent that whole thing, and that's why we participated in the freedom struggle in South Africa.
There's another question which I think kind of relates to this, and talking about their own experience as well. So I'm just reading it out. I was brought up in an environment, both at home and at school, that laid emphasis on equity, individuality, freedom, responsibility. But as soon as I stepped outside of that world, I was shocked to see how unfair the world really was. Was this something that you also faced, um, given the way in which you were brought up versus how the world was kind of maybe outside of that bubble, or was there a bubble in the first place? And how did you adjust to the realities of it?
Yeah, there were you in our home there was a lot of freedom, respect for each other, and so on. You go out into the world and you see a different world altogether, and it is that reality strikes you in a really amazing way. In that you just feel stunned at first, and that yeah, it did happen, but what you realize is that you can bring about changes, and you do have the power to bring about changes. You don't have to accept that since this is what is outside, that is the real, not what is inside in your home. What is in your home, you need to take it outside. Of course, if it is good, because some people are brought up in the home with a lot of restrictions, and suddenly they go out and find, hey, this is independence, you know. So it works both ways. Have I lost you?
No, I'm right here.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the important thing for us, and this is what Gandhiji said, that in the first 10 years of your life, you begin to discriminate, you begin to form some values, and you begin to learn, what is right and what is wrong, and how to discriminate between right and wrong. And this takes place throughout your life. It's lifelong learning. Because sometimes you think certain things are right, but later you realize, hey, that wasn't right, it's wrong. And so you're still learning how to discriminate between right and wrong. But the important thing is that once you realize that there is an injustice, then you must confront it. You can't just say, well, it's not my business, I'm not going to do anything about it. This is what I was taught, that it's our responsibility to bring about the change that is necessary.
Okay. Um, there's a question. It's difficult to live a self-sustainable life in cities. Should we move to villages and live a simple life? What are your suggestions?
I didn't quite get that question. Can you ask again?
I'll repeat it. So it's difficult to live a self-sustainable life in cities. Should we move to villages and live a simple life? What are your suggestions?
Okay, I know that, a lot of young people feel that Gandhiji's ideas were too puritanical, it's too difficult to live a simple life. Like, he is portrayed to have said. But Gandhiji himself didn't say that you have to give up everything. He enjoyed life. He was very fond of life, There are lots of things he did. When you look at little anecdotes, he enjoyed walking, for instance. But not just walking, he would enjoy the nature and, all that, even food and so on. And so, when you talk about simple life, it's what we are doing right now under this COVID-19 situation. We are sitting at home. We are thinking what we can cook and what we will eat. We are not thinking of going to a restaurant or to order food from somewhere. We are looking at doing it ourselves. And that is, simple, because whatever you do yourself, you are contributing to your own cooking and your own eating habits. And so I think that, when we also talk about religion, because I think the questioner has talked about religion and simplicity. So when we talk about religion and simplicity, and you take certain vows, religious vows, and you become a monk or a nun or, a swami or whatever, that is a completely different thing. That is something that comes from your temperament. If you want to, if you are inclined towards something like that, you want to give up. But that's not what Gandhiji said. Gandhiji said that you got to live in your, and he lived within the community. He lived with the people. He didn't live outside the community in a monastery or in an. Yes, he had an ashram, but he was very close to the people around the ashram. And the ashram was just there to bring in like minded people so that they can form a group of people who can go and offer service to humanity. So the basic thing is that your inclination is the most important. You can do anything. You can be anything, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, engineer. Use your skills and ability to enhance life, to make life better, this world a better place. And that is the most important thing. Use your knowledge to improve the whole condition in the world. So, how do you improve the ecosystem that is dying? What we see now by shutting down, the ecosystem has revived. How do you now, um, keep that ecosystem so that your world is not going to be destroyed? I think those are the important things that people need to start thinking about. There's no one answer, but it is an opportunity for us to begin to think.
The next question. mm, as a child or a young woman under her parents' care, you must have, as everybody does, made mistakes. How did your parents or your grandparents navigate these learning moments or opportunities to learn? And have you inculcated them in your life in any way?
Well, we all learn from our mistakes. This is what my parents taught me, that mistakes are inevitable. Everybody makes mistakes. Even Gandhiji made mistakes in his life. But you turn the mistakes into a learning experience. If you make a mistake and you continue to make that mistake, because now you think that, well, this mistake is a good mistake, it's giving me happiness, must carry on with that mistake, and it remains with you throughout your life. You know deep down that it's wrong, but you still continue. Then you haven't learned anything. But if you have learned that this mistake is really wrong and I've got to do something about it, then depending on the kind of mistake it is, it may be rigorous, it may be hard to change from, whatever you were doing to something else, but you have to learn it. And learning a new thing is important. That is what change is all about. That is what Gandhiji said. And so you learn new things. You learn them from making mistakes in the past. You've now learned a new thing. And from this, how do you develop it into a good habit, a good way of living, and spread it to other people in the world? So I think that is what it is. But if you sit and you decide that this is a mistake, I am not going to be able to change from this, it's too deep down in me, and you sulk and you think that you are no good, you have a low self-image and so on. That doesn't help because you must always remember that the most important thing is self-confidence. Develop self-confidence. Self-confidence comes from also loving yourself. not being bragging or anything like that, but you love yourself for who you are, for just you know yourself. And if you love yourself, anything that you love, you will look after.
You love your music instrument. If you have an instrument, you always make sure that you clean it nicely and you keep it properly and you make sure that it's not damaged. So if you love yourself, you will keep yourself well and you will not engage in things that don't keep you well. And that is mind, body, and soul. When I say well, it's the mind, it's the body, and the soul. That's what a holistic approach was. That is what Gandhiji said. Wellness is not just about physical wellness, it's about your mind, body, and soul. How do you keep all that well?
I think this has struck me at a very personal level. So thank you. A few other questions. Like the pumpkin incident, have you ever felt that leading a life in the Gandhian path was a difficult one?
Well, I was born and brought up at Phoenix Settlement, which was Gandhian style, and it became a habit. So, I don't find it difficult at all. I enjoyed it. I love to think that I'm not attached to anything, although I can't say that I am living completely like Gandhiji. Uh, you know, I haven't simplified my life to the extent that Gandhiji simplified his life. But certainly, I can give up everything today and go and live somewhere and not feel that, I have lost out. And I think that that's the most important thing. When you have attachment to things, then you feel that you just can't live without cell phone, computer, all those kinds of things. And when you get to, I have been to places where the cell phone computers are useless because there's no bandwidth over there. You're just living right out in the village where you don't have anything. And then you make do. You begin to learn new things, new way of communicating, new way of enjoying life. Yeah. By the way, I grew up in a house where there was no electricity. We had paraffin lamps. We had to cook on, coal stoves and all that. We had no sewer system right until I was about years old. We didn't have any electricity. At age 20, we had a generator which gave us a little bit of electricity, but not enough to have, any of the appliances like a fridge or an electric stove and all that. We didn't have that until much later. So I grew up with that kind of system, and I mustn't say that. I think it was such a lovely life that we led without all the, you know, uh, electricity and all the gadgets and everything that we have now. Although I'm grateful for it now that I can communicate with you and with many other people. I live all by myself in this flat. My son was just visiting, fortunately, and he helped with this. But I'm all alone here, and the only way I can communicate is with the cell phone and with this computer. So um, if I weren't able to communicate with anyone, then I think that this would be important.
Um, your identity as Ela Gandhi, as an individual who's done her life, was your granddaughter. Do you think the work that you've done all your life so far was inevitable because of um, by whom and where you were brought up, or was there another pull?
Um, you see, in South Africa, it's different. Bapuji was, he lived 21 years here, and a lot of people admired him. But nothing as here. In India, it's about Bapuji, and the whole is different. It's different. So, firstly, to be, Gandhiji's or Bapuji's granddaughter wasn't such a big thing. It didn't give us any greater recognition or anything. But to live in the apartheid system was a big thing. If you lived in the apartheid system, you would want to do something about it. It was such an unjust system that, there was no way that people are going to not do something about it. It's natural to participate and whatever, which was a small role. I'm not saying about everything like that. What I did, thousands of other people have done. So, I just played a small role in the freedom struggle.
The apartheid government placed you under house arrest for 9 years, and yet you continued your political work in different ways during that time. How did you cope with all of the restrictions, both physical and mental?
See, the thing is that when you are under house arrest, you know that they are imposing these restrictions on us so that we won't continue with the political work. That is why they are restricting us. It's an arbitrary restriction because there's no reason, they don't give you a reason for banning you and house arresting you. They don't give you a reason. Just as at that time, they could just take you and put you in a prison with no reason at all. The police have the power, 90-day detention, and it could be, you could be held for 180 days. So you could just be picked up and put in the jail, and no reasons would be given for that. So these restrictions were, restrictions that were imposed on us to, to lower our morale, so that we will then be afraid. We would say, no, 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 I don't want to do anything about this in case. I don't want to criticize the government because, this is what they can do to me and make you afraid. And fear is a thing that, it destroys you. Fear actually destroys you. Gandhiji learned that in his life. Lots of anecdotes about fear. and how Kasturba taught him, how his nanny, his eye taught him in the early days not to be afraid, and he learned those lessons over a period of time. And he learned from those lessons that courage is the most important thing, that fear is just destructive. It destroys your entire self-image and everything. You get, um, sort of overtaken by the fear. So you're afraid of everything around you. And you can't do anything. And if you take, for instance, a person, with differently able, for instance, if the person has an eye problem, can't see, vision problem, and that person has to navigate a room, and if that person is scared, that person will never move from one spot. That person has to develop courage to get up and start moving. Even if you bang into something, you carry on and you learn how to navigate yourself within that environment. So in the same way, we also have to learn to navigate within that environment of, repression and so on. And you can't allow them to beat you down so that you're not going to do anything. That's what we did in those days. For us, defying the laws was important. Today, I don't think under this COVID-19 situation, we need to defy it. We must comply with the COVID-19 situation. We must comply with all the regulations. But in those days, we felt that we had to defy as much as we can. And we did.
Um, from a Gandhian perspective, how do you view Mandela's life and legacy? And what was it like meeting him prior to his release from prison?
With Mr. Mandela, yeah. Well, he was our hero. So, and you have many heroes as well who didn't completely agree with Gandhian principles, like Subhash Chandra Bose and Jayaprakash Narayan and Aruna Asif Ali, many others who didn't quite accept the Satyagraha principles. So in South Africa, Mr. Mandela, he was a hero because he was considered as the Scarlet Pimpernel. He evaded the police for so many months they couldn't find him. And he would rise up somewhere and then come back again and go into hiding, come out somewhere. And it was amazing. And we all just, loved him as a leader. This was before he went to prison. And then when he was eventually arrested, we were all shocked and very, very sad that he got arrested. And initially, everybody was just saying, that if they just hang him or something, there'll be a revolution. And I'm sure if, they did, there would have been a war in South Africa. Nobody would have sat there. Nobody would have stayed on at that stage. Just as maybe in India, if Gandhiji was arrested and if they had hung him, I don't think the people would have then said non-violence. They would have gone on a rampage. So that is what that is we regarded Nelson Mandela. But we were very happy, and our whole struggle outside after he went to prison, because he continuously told us that nonviolence is the way that we have set ourselves. And so we had four pillars to our struggle. The one was the mass democratic struggle in the country, where we organized the masses on a non-violent way. The other was the anti-apartheid movement, which outside the country was organized on a non-violent basis to, have called for boycotts of South African products, to boycott South African artists, sports, and so on, so that in that way it would hurt the economy, the culture, and all those things, and that will bring the South African government to the table, because we constantly said, come and let's have a negotiated settlement. That is what we asked for. Come to the table and let's talk. Now, you must remember, in South Africa, it wasn't like India. There wasn't another power that was in the country. And when you get freedom, they can leave and go back to Britain.
In South Africa, we had South Africans, white South Africans, who had no other country. They have no other country to go to. South Africa is their country. And so we had to recognize that these are people who are going to stay with us. They will have to learn to live with us, and we will have to learn to live with them. We can't chase them out, and we can't just think of killing all of them. That's out of the question. So those were the two non-violent legs of our struggle. The violent legs were the defense force, the South African army, which was outside
South Africa and was, fighting with the South African defense soldiers on the borders of South Africa. Not because they wanted to come into South Africa, but because South Africa was attacking them on the, outside South Africa in other countries, the bordering countries and so on. So that was the South African army outside, the external army, which was the regular army, but wasn't a very, very powerful, like underground movement or anything. We also had an underground movement in the country. But in the main, the underground movement, if you look at the training that they got, the training was, we always respect life. You don't try to kill people. You respect life. But you do those things that would eventually bring the government to their knees and will bring the government to the table to negotiate a settlement. So ungovernable, kind of movement, underground movement that we had. So those were the two that did engage in violent activity, and the two, the mass democratic struggle and the anti-apartheid struggle, that were non-violent. But they all worked together in the sense that we didn't condemn each other. We wouldn't kind of condemn a person because, that person threw a bomb, and on an installation or something, or was in the external army and so on. We don't condemn them. But we practice non-violence. So
can you elaborate a little bit on the nonviolent resistance to the apartheid in South Africa?
Well, as I told you already, the non-violent resistance was the mass democratic struggle inside the country. And the way we ran the mass democratic struggle is to take up local issues. So we find communities and we see what the problems are. And we begin to educate the communities that this is happening to you because of this government. And we have to protest against that. So you begin with small protests, like, you boycott rent, you don't pay rent, you refuse to pay rent. In the places where people are living in rented housing schemes, government rented housing schemes. We had, boycotts of various things. No, we didn't boycott our university, but we boycotted the graduation because the graduation was also, discriminated against. Our university discriminated against us.
Separate places where the same lecturers would come. We paid our fees to the same university, but they would lecture us in a different place. We initially had an old school building that they would rent out, and the lecturers would come there and lecture to us in the school building. Then they found a warehouse which they converted into classrooms, and we would have our classes in that warehouse. So we went through, those conditions, but we wanted education because we felt that education is important. Without education, we wouldn't be able to understand what is going on, and we would be completely relegated to, you know, um, a sort of kind of outcast in society. So we valued education and we wanted that education, but we boycotted the graduation. We didn't go to graduation. We said, no, we're not going to give you our credibility. And wherever possible, we would have placards. We would stand with placards and say, that we are protesting and why we are protesting. So we had placard demonstrations, boycotts. We had marches against, we engaged in many marches in South Africa. Then we would defy, like, in 1989, we defied, the beaches were separate beaches for different race groups. So we all black people went onto the white beach and defied, that. And we had a lot of people, so we had the religious groups joining us. We had, they were in the forefront, they would, because they wouldn't get attacked, and we would march behind them. But we had, all the uh, leaders of the different religious groups with us. We had teachers, we had academics, we had workers, we had women, we had students. So all the different sectors of society were mobilized to march, and then we went onto the beach, and then there was a whites only hospital. We went and demanded attention in that hospital and walked into the whites only hospital and so on. So again, just defying the laws. And there were lots of defiances over a period of time like that. And
There's a question about, yes, so even after 150 years of Gandhiji, there are still a lot of critics of Gandhi and Gandhian philosophies. How do you see them?
Well, people have made mistakes in their life. If you look at the mistake, we all can be criticized just for the one mistake that we might have made at some time in our life. Gandhiji himself said, that people should not dwell on criticism, they should dwell on how can we change things. If you keep dwelling on criticizing other people or other things, then you become a regular critic, an armchair critic, as they call it. You do nothing. You just spend your time looking at the bad things. And you gain nothing from it. Your personality doesn't improve. You don't change. You don't become a better person by criticizing. So, yes, there are critics who have criticized Gandhiji for various things. I don't want to go into all those different aspects, but they have their own ideas and they don't want to look at the bigger picture. They don't want to look at the better side of Gandhiji. They want to look at the dark side. And they have the right to look at the dark side if they feel that it's giving them satisfaction. Whatever that satisfaction is, good luck to them. What can we do about it? But we are not going to waste time with them. That's what we feel. By wasting time trying to look for, answers to all the things that they say, it's just a waste of time. Why do we need to change them? They need to change themselves. They don't need me to go and convince them that Gandhiji wasn't what they are saying. They know, they have read, they can look for themselves. Again, an anecdote, I'll tell you a small anecdote. This was written by Mr. Bhattacharya. Dr. Bhattacharya had written about Gandhiji as a journalist and a writer. And in his book, he cites this anecdote. On one of his journeys, his voyages on the ship, there was a group of young people and they wrote stories. They brought out a little newsletter and they called the newsletter Scandal Times. Scandal Times, they called it. And then they found all the wrong things that people were doing and they put little stories about all that, embarrassing things that people might have done on the ship. And then they brought this, after they compiled the whole thing, they brought it to Gandhiji and showed him the pages and asked him to read and give his opinion. So Gandhiji took the papers and he started reading and he read, and after a while he gave them the papers back and there was a clip that was attaching the papers. He took the clip out and he gave them the papers. And so they said, "So what did you think of our articles?" And Gandhiji said, "I took the most precious thing from your articles." That was the clip that he took from the article. So you can see that that was Gandhiji's idea, that you can waste your time trying to find all these, um, that's why he had the three monkeys. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. So if you are looking at the good things in life, your life becomes better. things around you. You're not looking at the ugly things, and you're not looking for all the, uh, evil things in another person or anything like that. You're looking at the beauty. And every person has good side and bad side. You can find. There's not a single person who doesn't have a skeleton in the cupboard. Something that, they might have done wrong.
This is a question we ask everyone who comes on these sessions. If you could recommend 5 books for children, young adults, and adults, and 5 documentaries as well.
Documentaries and 5 books.
Yes.
Okay. Um, that's a tall order. I really like Bhattacharyaji's book. I enjoyed reading Kamath and Care, the book on militant but non-violent trade unionism. That's a book on Gandhiji. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the book by Eknath Ishwaran. He wrote about Bapuji, and I enjoyed reading that as well. I like Louis Fisher's book, and of course, my experiments with truth tells you everything. Bapuji, his life was open, except that he exaggerated his mistakes much more. I know that my cousin Rajman, uh, he wrote about Gandhiji. Now, if you read my experiments with truth, Gandhiji says that I was a hopeless student and all that. But Rajman Gandhi, he found the actual, uh, you know, reports of his marks, what he had achieved in school. And he wasn't such a bad pupil after all. He wasn't the top person in the class, but he was in the first 10, you can say, or first 20. He didn't go right to the bottom, but Gandhiji himself talks as though he was at the bottom of the range, of the students. So I think, although we read my experiments with truth, we must read it in conjunction with other books where you can see or get the facts, because he exaggerates his mistakes. And in documentaries, well, I'm not very familiar with the documentaries. There are a lot that are produced in India. I think the making of the Mahatma. Hello, hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Sorry. Yes.
Can you, the making
I'm
of
just
the
not able to see you. You're coming in
South
slightly
Africa.
broken.
Hmm? Okay, can I
Yes.
go on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Documentary, the making of a Mahatma, which was made in South Africa, is a very good one. It was, it's a film that, on Gandhi's life in South Africa. It's very long, and sometimes you get tired of watching it. But I think it is a good one. It tells you. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Hello? Okay, so it tells you about the South African life, South African Gandhi. And then I like uh, some Mahatma Gandhi. And
Ela,
then
you're looking a
the
little
whole
broken. Can you maybe disable your video so that we can hear you a little better?
video is on. I've got to start sharing the top, but
Yes.
shall I exit that?
No, that's okay. I think you're coming in clearly now.
Yeah, because I go completely out of it.
Yes. Sorry, please continue.
Okay, can you see me now?
Um, I'm not able to see you, but I'm able to hear you clearly. I think that's okay.
Okay, so I was saying that those are two movies that were made, not really just documentaries, they movies. And but the documentaries that are made in India, I've seen a couple of them. I can't remember the name now, but I think they were really good.
Okay.
Yeah, not sure what's happening.
That's okay. Maybe if you could just disable the video alone, then we could hear you a little better. Okay, so the last question for today. So you were very young during independence in 1947. So do you have any memories regarding the night of independence? And also, along with that, you've read that you used to run around tying a piece of handkerchief on a little stick and singing the freedom song on August 1947. So can you please sing it for us?
Okay. Yeah, the freedom, India's freedom was really, a moment that really, and that's morning when the Indian flag went up. I was in Akola in my uncle's little village, and the school, there was a little school, and they put up the flag. They brought down the British flag and put up the Indian flag, and they sang that song, Janda Ucha Rahe Hamara. That was what I done, because we were all given little flags on that time. And I really enjoyed that, and it gave me a fervor, patriotism. So I've always had that patriotic spirit, both India and South Africa, because South Africa is my country of birth. And I was so fortunate that I experienced the independence of both the countries, South Africa and India. Were you able to hear me? I can't hear you now.
Oh, would you be able to sing us a line or two?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, would you be able to sing us a line or two?
I can't sing now. My voice is gone so bad. I haven't been singing at all these days because of the problem I have with my throat.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that brings us to the end of the session.
I want to say at that time I was in it, and it was, really a patriotic moment for me.
Well, that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Ela ji. I don't think I can put into words um, how meaningful this was to me, and I'm sure to everybody else who was with us today. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Meera ji. Thanks a lot to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you, all of you, for coming and for your questions. And I would like for all of you to please write about this session mm, as soon as possible, as soon as this session comes to an end. I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts going on in everybody's minds, and it's always really nice to put it down, to be able to um, go back to whenever you feel like, even if you don't in the moment, write down what you think. So please do write and put it up on your social media, share it with your friends, with your family, and get the word going about all the amazing people that are there with us. Thank you so much for being with us.